Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 25 series. Can we save the Oakland A's? And we'll start off this episode with a couple real world things. One bad news, one good news. The bad news, obviously, the unexpected passing of Rickey Henderson. This is one that kind of hit me pretty hard. Rickey, who came up into the majors in 1979. I was just finishing up second grade, I believe, when he made his major league debut. Was into baseball then. 1980 is the year that I really remember getting into baseball cards, although I had some earlier baseball cards from 1979, and I remember that 1980 Rickey Henderson A's rookie card being a card that I lucked into a copy or two of when I was younger, and at one point thought was going to fund my retirement or make me rich beyond my imagination. But Rickey is one of the oldest players whose careers I got to basically appreciate most of. I can't say until, probably 1982 when he set the major league record with 130 steals. And for those of you who are going to be technical on this fact, I guess we can say the modern day major league record with those 130 steals. Really, kind of was well into baseball by then, and definitely appreciated watching him for more than 2 decades after that. Clearly one of the greatest players of the 80s, well into the 90s. And the guy was still playing, as I said, when when his career started. It was in the 1970s, and I was in second grade. When his career finished, I was well into my 30s. Just an absolutely incredible, one-of-a-kind career. I've said before on this channel that the 2 best all-around baseball players I've ever had the pleasure of watching in my lifetime are Rickey Henderson and Barry Bonds. Obviously, lots of other great players: Ken Griffey Jr., Shohei Ohtani, Mike Trout, and many others I could mention on that list of some of the greatest players that I've ever seen. But as far as being able to do everything and do everything at a very high level and just single-handedly win a game through their pure force of will and incredible athletic skills, I still put Rickey Henderson and Barry Bonds at the top of that list. Rickey, obviously the greatest leadoff hitter in history. I don't think there's any question about that. Most stolen bases in Major League history by a huge amount over Lou Brock. Most runs scored in Major League history, and second all-time in walks behind the aforementioned Bonds, and one of only 4 players with over 2,000 walks: Bonds, Rickey, Babe Ruth, and Ted Williams. Obviously lofty company to be in. Rickey was a member of the Yankees for kind of my high school years primarily, so obviously loved having him as a member of the team there. Was just such a unique personality, such a gifted baseball player, and it's definitely a bummer. He seemed like someone who would always be around the game, but I guess I'm getting to the age where some of the older players that I grew up watching and appreciating for their entire careers are 10, 15 years older than I am, and I guess we're heading into that time where more of them are going to be in passing on. But Rickey was just such an exceptional player, just such an interesting personality. As I said, the greatest leadoff hitter in baseball history, and I don't think there's any close number 2 on that topic. Don Mattingly, who is probably my favorite baseball player of all time, kind of put Rickey into perspective yesterday. And I paused the video briefly because I just wanted to get Mattingly's quote completely accurate. And he said, Rickey was simply the best player I ever played with. He could change the outcome of a game in so many ways. Puts a smile on my face just thinking about him. I will miss my friend. And he definitely could change the outcome of a game in so many ways. And as I noted, in my opinion, one of the two best players I've ever seen. And honestly, I think if I were to start a team with any player in history in their prime to build around, picking up peak Rickey Henderson to be your leadoff hitter is certainly a move that could be defended. Hard to pick against Babe Ruth in any of these type of circumstances, but of players that I've actually seen, I can certainly make an argument to take Rickey over Barry or Griffey or any of the other great players that I've had the pleasure of watching. So condolences and prayers to Rickey's family. Definitely a guy that I grew up watching and was always one of my favorite players. And as I said, just a unique skill set, unique personality, and gone way too soon. Moving on to some good news, at least I think for the Yankees in the real baseball world before we jump into this episode. Yesterday, as several of you have noted in the comments to recent episodes, the Yankees signed Paul Goldschmidt. So that fills the hole that we have at first base with the departure of Anthony Rizzo. I think it's a good move for the Yankees. Is Goldschmidt as good at this point as a Pete Alonso or a Christian Walker, who's obviously off the market now? I think it's hard to say that. You look at what's happened with Goldschmidt over the last couple years, and he's certainly an aging player that appears to be in decline. 2022, he won the MVP with a 981 OPS. 2023, that dropped to 810. And in 2024, that dropped to 716. So that is a precipitous drop, and he's going to be 37 years old this upcoming season. If we want to use more old school stats, when he won the MVP with St. Louis in 2022, 317 average, 35 homers, 115 ribbies. 2023, that dropped to 268, 25 homers and 80 ribbies. And last year, that dropped to 243, 22 homers and 65 runs batted in. So it's hard to imagine him having a monster season for the Yankees. But as a one-year deal, I think it makes sense for the Yankees, given the massive contract the Yankees gave to Max Fried and the big contract for the next 1 to 2 years that they've taken on with Cody Bellinger. I think that even for a team like the Yankees, which I believe was third in terms of the payroll penalties they had to pay for this past season that just came out recently, behind just the Mets and the Dodgers, I think there is a limit. Hal and Cashman have both been clear that there is a limit. And I think Goldschmidt can help them. Gives them a legitimate major league first baseman for next year while maintaining a little bit more payroll flexibility than, for example, having gone 3 years for Walker, or 5, 6, maybe 7 years, whatever Alonso ends up getting. Next offseason, Kyle Tucker and Vladimir Guerrero Jr. will likely both be free agents and not tying up a ton of long-term money in Goldschmidt, probably. At least lets us Yankees fans hope that they might be competing for one of those guys in a year. So at this point, the big hole left for the Yankees after bringing on Goldschmidt, Bellinger, Fried, and Williams is second base or third base, depending on where they end up playing Jazz Chisholm next year. As I talked about in the last episode, I don't think it's inconceivable that some combination of Cabrera, Peraza, LeMahieu get to compete for one of those spots. I don't really mention Ben Rice anymore because I think first base is his most likely spot that he would be playing in the majors. Would obviously love it if they brought on a Bregman to handle that third base position, but that may be getting greedy at this point. But I think the Yankees' response to the loss of Juan Soto has been very reasonable at this point, and with the addition of Goldschmidt and those other moves, you're certainly not going to hear me complaining. As a Yankees fan, I'm always greedy. Would love to throw Bregman in the mix, but I don't know how realistic that really is at this point. And now back to our fictional Oakland A's as the free agency period for 2039 to 2040 gets underway. Mentioned at the end of the last episode that Chisen Iwata, also known as Melody, a soon-to-be 23-year-old shortstop who's coming to the major leagues from Japan, is a very intriguing option to me. Unfortunately, we have low scouting accuracy on him, and despite the fact that he's on the top of our scouting list, it always takes a while to get these initial scouting reports from low scouting accuracy on the international free agents. He's someone that's very intriguing to me. He's a good defensive player. He's got good speed. He's good in the clubhouse. And he can potentially have an excellent bat if he's anywhere close to these ratings that we think he has. I really love our infield right now with Landin at second, Pimentel at third, Toribio at short, and likely Alcindor or the youngster Godina at first base next year. But Toribio is a guy who could be moving into more of a utility infielder role, and I think we could pivot Landin to short, which is actually where he played most of last season, to be honest, and put in a guy like Iwata at second, still have Pimentel at third, Godina, Alcindor fighting for first base and utility infielder time along with Toribio, and have an absolutely incredible infield. But given that we are the Oakland A's and we still have one of the smallest budgets in all of baseball, I'm a little leery about offering him a big-time contract before we've got a more accurate scouting report. There is some risk that we lose him because of that. But I just don't know how responsible it would be to perhaps be giving him around $90 million over 5 years without knowing more about him. The OSA ratings on him, though, suggest that he kind of is what we think he is. I mean, it looks like the OSA arguably thinks he might even be a better player than we think, with a little more home run power and a little more gap power than we anticipate. The other thing in Iwata, I often say the other thing. I realize when I'm doing this, like you can read my minds while I'm talking, which I don't think you can. But on Iwata, the worldwide scouting department, I think, is largely supportive of us investigating him. Kwaitam Dude, Avery Shayam, and Paul West all think he's definitely worth at least exploring very heavily, if not signing. Now to the other thing. that's going on in my mind that I wanted to note about Iwata. If we do sign him, what I need to be fair about is signing Iwata to a contract that, let's say, is going to be paying him $15 million in 2041. It's going to push our anticipated payroll next year up to about $135 million, which, given our overall budget, we can probably just about afford. But we need to keep in mind that Jake Ortega is in the final year of his run with us and his contract with us at this point. And Mr. Ortega right now is looking for 5 years at $30 million a year to sign an extension. Given that he's wrecked physically and he's missed most of 2 of the past 3 seasons, and we also have him in the development lab working on his strength and conditioning and a bit of a Hail Mary that, given his age and his physical fitness, might end up actually hurting him more than helping him. But with all of those uncertainties about him, I don't think we're going to do anything with Ortega contract-wise until next offseason. Unless, obviously, he has a monster year and decides he wants a lot less money during the season. But I'm not anticipating those things happening. But if we bring Iwata on board, even if we were to pare back scouting and development incredibly, you can see Iwata's basically got all of our money for extensions right now. We're going to have to, if we wanted to, a year from now, have both Iwata and Ortega on this team, make some very difficult decisions to relieve some contract money. I think the most obvious one to me might be trading away Doug Weiss, who's going to be making about $12 million next year in arbitration. We do have we think, potentially excellent young starters in Arriola and Comunez on the way. So if we were to lose both Chase Dora and Doug Weiss after this season, I think we could replace them reasonably. And I think we would get a lot for a guy who would be 28 years old a year from now, set to make money in arbitration, but not money that's crippling for a big market team. I think we could get a nice return back on Weiss if we traded him away to try to free up some money to have both Iwata and Ortega on the roster together a year from now. Probably would be the end of Sergio Palomares if we brought Ortega back. Not that I think Ortega is going to be playing center field for us much anymore. But unless Palomares establishes himself as a well above average offensive player this season, if we're still kind of using him more as a fourth outfielder with some of the other young outfielders we have on the way, might have to move on from Palomares. You could certainly make an argument to trade away Jorge Mendoza, who's going to be making a ton of money, if our excellent young catching prospect, one of the top prospects in baseball, is ready to go next year in Jonah Richards, who we think is going to have an outstanding bat. And although we've been training him at first base, we think he can be a very good defensive catcher as well. So long story short, I think there is a path, if we sign Iwata, to having the franchise spend his entire career with this franchise on the table. But realistically, we're going to have to make some real difficult decisions a year from now if we do sign Iwata and want to bring back Ortega. And honestly, those big decisions aren't a year from now. They're probably 8, 9, 10, at most 11 months from now in game time. So as much as I like Iwata, there are other things to think about. But I do think there is a path to having both Iwata and Ortega on the team in 2041. But like I said, it probably means that you're losing Mendoza or Weiss and probably another pretty important player or two, assuming that I'm not just going to completely rip scouting and player development down to the bare bones. And given that at this point we do have the second-rated farm system in baseball, and while there's a lot of talent close to the majors, there's also a lot of top talent that's far away. Want to ensure that we continue investing in the development to keep this organization as one of the most successful teams in baseball over time. Kind of interesting also that even with our low budget situation, for the first time, I think, in this playthrough, we're not going to have the full $5.7 million to spend as far as international amateur free agents this upcoming IAFA period. You can see there's about 10 teams with the $5.7 million, and even though our budget is still very low, I think the amount of success that we've had on the field over the years, and the fact that right now, as we head into the offseason, our payroll is actually 19th, has limited that amount for us a bit. Outside of Iwata, I don't think we're going to be adding anything materially into the mix of money that we'll be spending for this upcoming season. So we'll certainly end up in the 20s, as a lot of other teams spend much more than us over the next few months. But if we add Iwata into the mix, we're going to have a pretty healthy payroll, at least for our Oakland A's, for the 2040 season. And given that I have a lot of confidence in our scout, and given that the OSA ratings are not dissimilar to what our scout thinks Iwata is and could be, I think I may at least have initial conversation with Iwata about a contract right now. I don't know that it's going to be something he'll accept, and it's not inconceivable that he won't sign with us or anybody until we get that scouting report back, at which point I could always anger him by pulling the contract if I really wanted to. We do have an opportunity here with a little bit of the money that we picked up in some of the trades that we talked about last episode to make the contract a bit front-loaded, which would make things a little more palatable if we decide we want to also bring back Ortega next year if we do get Iwata signed. So normally I want to be patient, but I don't think we're magically going to see that Iwata is not a very good contact hitter with good gap power, really good speed, and a good glove. The eye and the home run power, those are a bit more variable, but I've got a good amount of confidence in our scout. And I think we're going for it. We're trying to win a third World Series in 5 years this upcoming season, kind of cement our place as a dynasty. And I think Iwata, at his age, with the skill set that he brings, could be a real big part of what we're trying to do with this team over the medium to long term. So as I mentioned, he's looking for 5 years, averaging $17.6 million, with a player opt-out after 3, and then a player option for year 5. I don't know that we're going to give him those kind of terms, but we'll see if we can come up with something that'll at least think about. And he's also looking for some pretty significant MVP and All-Star bonuses as well. And I don't know that Iwata is going to go for this contract. And actually, we're going to give him slightly lower bonuses than he's looking for to be an MVP. Slightly higher bonus for an all-star. I don't think either of those are going to really make a difference. It's more the big numbers and the structure of the contract. As I mentioned, he's looking for 5 years at $17.6 million average with a couple of player options in there. We're offering him 5 years at an average of just $15 million with no player options, but we're also not throwing in a team option. I think age 27 at $13 million for him, unless he's not anything close to what we think he is, or he just has some devastating injuries, is not a contract we'd be looking to get out of. And putting in those team options would hurt us a little bit more with his potential acceptance. I don't know that this is quite enough to get him to engage, but the front-loaded nature of it probably helps a bit with the fact he'd be making $20 million this upcoming season. He says he's willing to think about it. So 5 years, $75 million total, a bit front-loaded, is the offer that we're putting out to Melody Iwata, despite the fact that we don't know a ton about him. And hopefully we'll know more about him before he potentially accepts this contract. This could be a huge risk for this Oakland A's franchise to be taking. Not just in terms of the money on an unproven player, but what it might mean that we need to do to our roster next year to keep Ortega, or could be the final step in guaranteeing that we won't be able to bring Ortega back. So with that offer to Iwata out there, I don't know that I'm going to have a ton of action otherwise over the next couple of weeks of game time. Hopefully we'll have a scouting report on him about the time of the winter meetings. We're going to continue scouting up the international amateur free agents because that signing period is just a little over a month and a half away for us. But I really like our team. And if we add Iwata into the mix, along with the trade we made for the lefty reliever Mendick, bringing back Hunsaker as a member of our bullpen, and then making the trade for the young left-handed hitting outfielder McIlvain, who could be in the mix to be a fourth or fifth outfielder for us next year. Adding Iwata into the infield obviously means there's nothing else we need to do there. And other than maybe taking a flyer on a player in the Rule 5, could be a relatively quiet offseason for us, but certainly the opportunity to add a player like Iwata into the mix is an intriguing and rare opportunity, especially given how young he is. And we've simmed ahead about a week and a half. Got an interesting trade opportunity, an opportunity to reunite with our old friend Andy Brailovsky, who was our first baseman for a few years. Reasonably productive offensive player for us at time, but now on the wrong side of 30, a very pedestrian offensive profile at this point, coming off a year where he was a well below average offensive player and well below replacement level overall. They would keep a big chunk of his salary and send us a pretty useless minor league first baseman. They're looking for minor league pitcher Eric Keach in return. This is an 8th round draft pick of ours in 2035. Looks like he could be a pretty interesting right-handed reliever for us in the not too distant future. Spent last year between AA and AAA and throws in the triple digits. So Rat Keach is not someone we're eager to give up, and if we were to give him up, we'd want more than a broken down 30-year-old first baseman, even though it would be a reunion of sorts, a reunion period with a player who was on each of our last 2 championship teams. And it's been around 2 weeks since we made the offer to Iwata. Still waiting on getting an updated scouting report on him, but he hasn't given us any reaction to the offer either. Seems like he's certainly weighing his options, and I'm sure other teams are scouting him as well. So seems like we might not end up in a situation where he hits the bid on our offer, or I guess more accurately, lifts our offer before we have a more updated scouting report on him. And one of the three real interesting international free agents that we have been scouting is signed. That's the veteran pitcher Zhu Huo, signed with the Tampa Bay Rays, a 4-year deal at over $20 million a year for the potential solid starting pitcher. Certainly think he's a really good potential starter, but given that we really like our rotation, and he's even more expensive than we expect Iwata to be, and he's a decade older than Iwata, signing Zhu Huo was never really a realistic prospect for our Oakland A's this offseason. And we have finally gotten some feedback from Chisen Iwata, and he says that we're in the lead right now. Supposedly Milwaukee and Pittsburgh also in the mix for him. The winter meetings now underway. Looks like the Red Sox got unlucky in the draft lottery, with the Brewers and the Diamondbacks getting very lucky. So a little bit of a tricky situation for us. Iwata likes our offer. We're still several days away likely from having a full scouting report. So I guess our hope right now is maybe he takes a little bit more time thinking about it. So we have the opportunity to potentially be weaselly and back out if we get that scouting report and we're likely up to average scouting accuracy on him and we see something we really don't like. We'll see what happens. And as expected, Juan Ramos has left. Overall fan interest almost crashed. Signed, of course, with the Yankees, 7 years, $162 million. So clearly a contract of that size means we're going to get a supplemental first-round pick for Ramos. Taking a look at the fan interest, and we did dip from well over 100, where I think we were, back to 99, so still in a pretty good place. You can see we have now dipped to 21st in player payroll as other teams continue signing players. And Iwata says that Los Angeles is interested in him, and it's the Los Angeles Dodgers. So once again, we find ourselves in a situation where there's a international free agent, and we're going up against a team with the second biggest budget in baseball and only the 17th biggest payroll right now. So they have a massive amount of money that they can spend. We're only a day or two away at this point, I think 2 days away from getting the updated scouting report on Iwata. Yeah, 2 days away, as you can see. Numbers aren't crazy. Looking for more than he was before. But it's not a number that we can't meet. I think I may wait the 2 days and assume he's not going to sign that quickly with the Dodgers to get the scouting report before we potentially find ourselves getting in a bidding war for Mr. Iwata. And we have simmed ahead a couple more days to the end of the winter meetings, and we've got that scouting report on Iwata. Oh, and we're actually up to high scouting accuracy, so we made a step even more than just average, which is positive. Still think his contact is excellent already and potentially world-class. Gap power above average. The home run power, he doesn't have that upside that we thought he might, in an average-ish eye, but still when you combine that outstanding contact with well above average gap power and really good speed, should be an extra base machine. Still think he looks like a good solid defensive infielder, particularly at second base. lets us move Toribio into becoming a super utility guy for us. Gives us more offense than we've likely gotten from Toribio in recent years, and also gives us a guy who we could bat towards the top of the order, which we've struggled with a little bit over the last few years, having a perfect first and second hitters in the lineup. Obviously wish there was a little more upside with the home run power, but it's not bad. Can always hope that the OSA is better and more accurate than us, but I tend to think that's not the case. So maybe a slightly above average eye, slightly below average home run power, above average gap power, and outstanding contact to go with really good speed, really good glove, really good influence in the clubhouse. I think we're willing to up our bid at least a bit. The Rockies have now made him an offer, though, and he's looking for an average of $20 million a year. So we're going to certainly have to be more aggressive than we have been. And I don't know that realistically we're going to go for more than what we've done. He said he was looking for over $100 million over 5 years. We're offering him $95 million, guaranteed over 5 years. We've upped the MVP bonus a little bit. You can see it is still slightly front-loaded, but more money in those mid-20 years than we were paying before. I don't know that we can get into a bidding war with the Rockies, much less the Dodgers on Iwata. But I want to try to compete for him at least. And he's willing to think about this offer. 5 years, $95 million, so $20 million, $4 million a year more than that initial offer that we made to him. But with what we know about him now, still think he could be a very useful player for this team going forward. And Iwata does say he favors our most recent offer, but we've heard that story before. And as we head into the Rule 5 draft tomorrow, still waiting to hear about Iwata. We've actually added 6 players onto our 40-man roster to make it a full 40 players. Had some pretty interesting young prospects that we didn't want to risk losing in the draft, and honestly, we still could lose some interesting players, unfortunately. So unlikely unless we see a really high-end Rule 5 prospect that makes us want to cut someone off the 40-man roster. Unlikely that we're going to be doing much of anything in the Rule 5 draft this year, other than likely losing a few decent prospects and a handful of 4A kind of players. And another one of our free agents is left, Rodney Mesidor, who has been our third baseman at times over the last few years. Didn't offer him anything in arbitration, and small hit to fan interest, but not something that's actually visible. And before we've even gotten to our first selection, we've lost 3 players in the Rule 5 draft. Jake Johnson, a 29-year-old 4A guy who was with our organization over the last year and a half or so. Not a big part of our future. Unfortunately, we lost 2 young guys, and we knew that we'd be losing some young talent, or likely to lose some young talent, given how much of it we couldn't protect. Luis Salinas is a 24-year-old, a decent-looking pitching prospect, but he's fragile physically. A guy who made it to AA towards the end of last season. He was not the next guy that we were going to protect. The next guy that we would have protected is a young outfielder, Juan Paredes, only 21 years old, although he's going to be 22 soon. Split last year between high A and AA, and was very productive at both levels, combining for 32 homers, 92 ribbies. Really good-looking outfield prospect with good speed. The bat might be slightly above average, but you combine a slightly above average potential left-handed bat with really good outfield defense and range and solid speed, and he's a guy that we were hoping wouldn't get picked. It's not inconceivable, given his youth, that maybe Seattle won't be able to keep him on the roster all year. Although I think if I was a team that wasn't really trying to compete and I could get my hands on a prospect like this, I would probably keep him on the roster all year so he became part of our organization. So Paredes was the 41st man. Sometimes you have to make some tough decisions, and like I said, I felt like he was the 41st man on the 40-man roster. He would have been the next guy that we added. So a little bit of a bummer to lose him, but I don't necessarily think he's a huge difference maker, although I think he could certainly have a really nice major league career. And like in our 40-man roster, we did not see anybody else that we wanted to take. Do we have two players named Luis Salinas? Or is this just a little error here? Oh, I guess we had... I don't know if that's a little bit of bug or not, but either we had two guys named Luis Salinas, who were both relievers. Actually, we had two relievers named Luis Salinas. The second one was more of a 4A guy who was taken. So good to know that there's not a bug in the draft. But so we lost only one other player, another reliever named Luis Salinas. So we lost four guys in the Rule 5 draft. Other than Paredes, nobody that I'm really upset about losing. And as I said, Paredes was the 41st man, so kind of went into the draft thinking that we might be losing him. And we got some bad news here. Lost Kamani O'Banner. We knew that was going to happen. 1 point hit to fan interest. So that's slightly bad news, but nothing that was not anticipated. But apparently we do have a big bug in the program because it says that we've signed third baseman Bo Young-an. And we never made an offer to Bo Young-an. You may remember he was one of the three interesting international free agents that were out there. But the player that we've been making an offer to has been Chisen Iwata, and that offer is still out there. I think there must be some kind of corruption in the database because when you look at the contract that we allegedly signed him for, it is that exact contract that we made to Iwata in our first offer to Iwata before we had the scouting report. Which obviously we updated not that long after we got the scouting report and found out that we were in a bit of a bidding war with Mr. Iwata. So I was hoping to finish off this episode by finding out whether or not we actually signed Iwata, but I'm actually going to have to figure out how to go into commissioner mode to wipe out this contract, and I don't know if I'm going to have to sign on to another team or I can just kick him back out into the free agent market by getting rid of this contract. But clearly I never made an offer to Bo Young-an. I have already flipped on commissioner mode after this unsettling development. I'm just wondering if maybe somehow they have the same player ID or something. 150031 for Mr. An. No, a totally different player ID for Chisen Iwata. I thought maybe there was something weird going on where they ended up with the same profile or something. But regardless, something that I'm going to have to fix because you've been following my offers over the course of this past episode. We haven't made any mention of Mr. An, and as you know, Iwata has been to my knowledge, the only offer that was sitting out there. So we're going to have to figure out why the original offer to Iwata ended up going to Mr. On, I guess after we made that improved offer to Iwata. So I'm clearly going to figure out a way to hopefully cancel out the On contract, and then we'll find out in the next episode whether or not we're able to actually sign Iwata. We'll also, in the next episode, be heading into the international amateur free agent period. So certainly we'll be highlighting the most interesting players available there. But as interesting a player as Bo Young An is, that low contact, high strikeout profile is not one that's attractive to us, even with the home run power in the eye. I'm sure you can all think of the names of players with that profile that we've had and experimented with over the course of this playthrough. Byron Brain, Hidero Endo, among others, was not someone I was looking to add. So something smells rotten in Denmark right now, and we're going to need to get to the bottom of exactly what happened and get this erroneous contract to Bo Young On off of our books somehow through the commissioner mode. And then next time around, we will find out whether we are able to actually sign the actual target of our affections, which is Chisen Iwata. So until our next episode, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.